Hello and welcome to the KPI Institute's webinar, KPI Balancing, How to Create a Relevant Performance Scorecard. My name is Andrei Kostia and I will be your host for today along with our presenter, Andrea Minelli. This webinar is part of a series of free educational materials that aim to enhance the knowledge and know-how of those interested, while also creating a bridge between us as a company and you, our public. The KPI Institute is a research organization specialized in business performance. It operates research programs in 12 practice domains, each linked to a certification course, ranging from strategy and KPIs to employee performance, and from customer service to innovation performance. The KPI Institute continuously builds on its values of best know-how, data and facts, and common sense to achieve its mission of integrating performance as a discipline through research, publications, and, what interests us today, through educational programs such as this webinar. Today, 14 years after the KPI Institute was created, we can proudly say that our products have reached professionals in 5 continents, and that our public comprises a worldwide community of 73,000 members online and 28,000 registered companies on smartkpis.com. In today's webinar, we will focus on how we can develop relevant performance management tools, such as the Balanced Scorecard, using a KPI selection technique known as KPI Balancing. It will be delivered by Andrea Minelli, a management consultant at the KPI Institute. He is a certified benchmarking professional and a certified KPI professional. His research activity in the performance management field has resulted in the documentation of over 500 KPIs. Andrea's undertaking in the field of performance management and improvement also consists of writing research-based articles. As a research specialist, Andrea has participated in the development of the Utilities Benchmarking Report series, covering 3 major utilities: water, gas, and electricity. Further, he is supporting the development of the Healthcare Performance Lab for the KPI Institute. As an educator, Andrea has delivered several webinars on the topic of performance measurement and performance improvement. This presentation lasts between 30 to 40 minutes. Please feel free to ask any questions you might have during the webinar, as they will be answered at the end of the presentation in our Q&A session. Enjoy the KPI Institute's webinar, KPI Balancing, How to Create a Relevant Performance Scorecard. Now, I would like to invite Andrea to begin his presentation.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, according to your time zone. Thank you, Andre, for your introduction, and welcome to today's webinar. As you can read from the title of the slide, today's webinar is going to be dedicated talking about KPI balancing. I chose to discuss about this topic because being involved with the projects, trainings, and having to interact with professionals that operate in different industries and departments, and that they are generally familiar with the concept of performance management and in concept of using KPIs within their organization, we had the chance to, let's say, share insights and share perspectives, as well as discussing a sort of perceptions and sometimes maybe some general disappointment when it comes to evaluating a current status of our performance manager system that is implemented in an organization. This is a general dissatisfaction sometimes is related to the fact that the data that we have access to and the relevancy of this data might be questioned by top management, by head of departments, and this general questioning whether these KPIs are relevant or not can also indicate whether the KPIs that we are actually monitoring are relevant in the context that we are applying it. So having said that, in today's webinar, I would like to discuss with you the idea of balancing KPIs, and maybe you will be able to share also some insights that maybe you are facing in your daily life, in your activities, about KPIs that you are currently monitoring in your organization or in the department you operate. Having said that, this webinar is going to be dedicated into an assessment of what the relevancy of having a balanced approach when it comes to KPIs. And as you can see here, we have an agenda with 6 main topics. We will discuss, starting briefly, about the idea of what is a KPI management framework, how this structure based on KPIs, what added value can we have, as well as having a general understanding and providing in real life practices about the importance of KPI balancing. And we will have 4 different criteria that we will discuss when it comes to balancing the KPIs in our performance dashboard, in our performance management tools, like leading and lagging criteria, efficiency, effectiveness, quantity and quality, subjectivity, and objectivity. Having said that, the main learning objectives that I really would like you to understand and embrace is the fact that through the applications of these balancing criteria, we are able to actually measure the achievement of strategic objectives, having a broader perspective when it comes to balance KPIs and assess how we are able to measure and progress towards our strategic objectives. And last but not least, when we apply these balancing criteria, we can actually discover that we're going to have a performance scorecard. It's a tool that I use to assess my performance in my department, in my organization, and see how relevant this scorecard is in order to take decisions based on performance data. So without further ado, let's start with the first topic. It's KPI management framework. Well, the idea is that when we implement a performance management system, it's an overall architecture. It's a mixture of having tools, it's a mixture of having people that will be involved in communicating the implementations of this system, of this architecture. It involves training and communication. But at the basis of this infrastructure, we have KPIs. For those of you who are maybe not aware of what KPI stands for, it's a key performance indicator. These are tools that are used to actually assess the performance. So I monitor the performance within a department, within an area that is relevant to me in a particular context. And there are associated some added value when you have KPIs, when you utilize KPIs within your organization. Of course, it is a matter of how and when and in which manner you implement such a system, you implement such a performance management system, and you base KPIs on that structure. The value added that you can see here are mainly associated with the fact that when implementing a PMS, you think about the effects that it has over our human resources on the employee side, because it's not just a matter of having a software solution that gathers data for you. It's also a matter of having a clear understanding that through the utilizations of these KPIs, I'm actually able to take actions. So through the measurement, I'm able to do performance improvement, take corrective actions to achieve a desired state. And these are the added values associated with KPIs, with having a system. It provides clarity. You have a clear understanding of what I'm measuring, what are my current status of performance. And this also can involve focus, because if I have people that are involved in such a measurement of performance, they will be totally aware of our current status and whether or not corrective actions are needed in order to achieve a better state of performance, or as we usually say, a desired state of evolution. And of course, as you can see, you have improvement. It is self-explanatory, because through the measurement of performance, you're able to also assess how can we achieve a better state. So it's an improvement stages of my current performance in my organization, in my department. However, we also have to focus on the people learning and growth side. So it actually allows and fosters communication, because if you have a straight communications about performance, if between head of departments and employees, you have a clear understanding of how my current stages of performance is, how my employees are performing, and how through the use of these KPIs, I'm able to take corrective actions. So it enables communications and learning, because I'm able to assess and learn from my experience, how can I improve? And eventually it leads to engagement, because if you see as an employee, if I am an employee and I see that through the use of KPIs, through my activities and job descriptions, I actually do count in this infrastructure, I actually can make a difference in achieving a better performance state. This will allow and foster engagement. However, I would really like to have your insights on that matter. And I have here created a poll for you. And the question is the following: what is the most challenging aspect of working with KPIs in your organization? What I would like from you is an honest answer, an honest opinion, point of view, that maybe you are actually facing in your working environment, in your organization or department. Here you have 5 choices. You will have to choose one answer, and I'll give you around 30 seconds to a minute. So Andre, if you want, you can launch the poll, and we will be waiting for the results. Thanks. I'm actually curious to see the results that we will have, because all of these are very interesting topics and very important concepts that are associated when we have to implement a performance management system. We have a structure. So I give you still a few seconds to answer the question. Just a few seconds to see, and then we will be able to discuss about the results. Andre, we are done? Perfect. Yes. Well, from the results, we have 42% of you that says selecting the right KPIs. And then we have 17% in decision making based on KPI results, and documenting KPIs clearly and constantly at 17%. And last but not least, root cause analysis, insight generation. Well, we can see that there is 42% of you who think that selecting the right KPIs should be considered the most challenging aspect. And indeed, when I am involved with consultancy projects with clients and we are implementing such a performance management system, the selections of the KPIs, the selection of the indicators, it really is considered to be the most challenging in terms of resources, in terms of time. And to support the answer that you have given me, we have recent reports that we have done. And this report was a survey, actually, where we asked professionals coming from different functional areas what was the most challenging aspect of working with KPIs. And as you can see, 32% confirmed that KPI selections is considered to be the most challenging aspect of when working with performance management system, followed by 28% data gathering, associate targets, which is equally as important to the KPIs, etc. However, the most challenging aspect, as you can see, is the actual selections of the KPI. So on this matter, let's have a discussions about these KPI selection techniques. Well, there are several techniques, and you can see from this picture that selecting the right KPIs, it is quite challenging. And generally, all the techniques that you actually see right now in the picture, they all provide relevant insights. We have the KPI clustering, KPI expo, value flow analysis. These are all very interesting and useful techniques. What we will discuss today in the webinar is mainly about KPI balancing. And the idea is that I really would like to say how the balancing can be a useful technique that is going to allow us, when you develop a scorecard, when maybe you have to review your strategic objectives and KPIs, can really provide some very good insights on that matter. So let's have a general discussion about the importance of balancing. First of all, as you can see, we have this word, it's balance. I'm really curious to see and to hear from you, what does balance mean to you in the business environment? How and what do you associate it with? Well, for this question, I hope that you can see on the right end of your screen, there will be a chat box. It's the last on the bottom part on the right side of your screen. It's a chat box where it says type message here. And from there, you can actually write a potential answer, what you think, what word does it come up when you think of balance? And then you just press send. So I'm going to give you a little minute for you to write anything that you think is relevant, that you think of when it is associated with the word balance. What does balance means to you? I'll give you a minute. Thank you. Again, just to make sure, it is on the right side of the screen. At the bottom, it's written chat. It's a chat box, and it says type message here. So you can write anything that is relevant to you and click send. Perfect. I will already start to see some of the answers. We have, from Mr. Cliff, we have well proportioned for all important aspects of the business. We have also weight as an answer. Let's see if we will have other answers as well. Yes, from Mr. Arpan, we have structured relevancy. Very good as well. These are generally good insights. Let me see if we will receive other proposals from participants from the audience as well, because so far, very interesting. Oh, yes, let's see this one. How well an employee applying his current skills and to what extent he or she is achieving the outcomes desired. Thank you, Ms. Steva. Well, these are very good insights. And the idea is that when you think about balance, personally speaking, I think about equilibrium, having an idea that I use my resources in a structured way, in a relevant way, and that I think that whenever do we have strategic objectives, that whenever we have to have a system to basically monitor our performance, we have to be able to take into considerations all the aspects of the business. So thank you very much for these insights. And the idea of balance, the idea of having a structured approach that involves my employees, that involves my processes, is associated with the concept of balanced scorecard. And as you can see here from this slide, the Balanced Scorecard is a tool that was developed by Kaplan and Norton in the 90s. It is a very successful business management tool that nowadays it is used in businesses, no matter the industry, no matter the functional area. However, with the Balanced Scorecard, as the name itself suggests, it gives you a general balanced approach, because generally there is this tendency of focusing and monitoring financial results. But it is important through the use of this performance management tool to bring to the equation other areas of the business that actually supports and leads to these financial outcomes. So when I think of the financial perspective, as you can see in the slide, we think about the result of my processes, the result of my interactions with clients, and as well my people, my resources that work in the organization. And of course, it is important to be able to have a balance, to provide equal importance to all of the aspects. As you can see here, we have 4 perspectives. We have financial, customer, internal processes, and people learning and growth. The important relevance is the fact that we need to be able to provide equal weight to these potential 4 perspectives. However, these perspectives are not, decisive. You can actually have perspectives that are relevant to the actual context. Maybe you work and your operations are related to risk. So maybe you can add a potential perspective like risk management rather than internal processes. So this is just to give you an idea that you have to have a broader perspective when it comes to business and when it comes to having a broader understanding of what the organization is performing, how it is performing. So the Balanced Scorecard in general helps you, can give you an idea of how can we actually lead to those financial outcomes. Indeed, here you can see that the financial perspective, as I was saying a few seconds ago, really provides very good insights, and people tend to focus mainly on the financial results. However, what the Balanced Scorecard helps you focus on is on the road that leads you to those financial outcomes. So starting from my people, my resources, focusing on their skills, on their competencies, on their engagement, as well as focusing on my processes. Because if I have skilled employees, if we work in an engaging environment, in an engaging working environment, my processes, my services will thrive, will actually benefit from having skilled and engaged workforce. And as a result, if we have good products and services that are delivered, what is the subsequent consequence is the fact that my customers will be satisfied. There is a high chance of customer that will come back. So customer retention that will come back to me asking for products or services because they had such a good experience. And eventually the financial gives you an idea that this is the result of these three main perspectives. So this is what the Balanced Scorecard helps you. It gives you a 360-degree when it comes to monitoring your performance and assessing how we are performing at the moment. Now, the Balanced Scorecard gives you and provide equilibrium between perspectives so far. So as you can see, we have discussed about the four main perspectives that we use in this example. But what about if we not only balanced between perspectives, but we are also able to balance within the perspective? That's a very important point, because what if we want to balance how efficient, how effective my processes are, and how good my products are? So this is more from a customer perspective. So we not balance between internal processes and a customer perspective, but we balance within them. That's a very important point to make. So the point is that to which extent are we able to manage to balance between different perspectives and within the same perspective? Well, let's have a little bit of a clearer understanding. When we refer to balancing within the same perspective, we refer to the fact that we have at least two KPIs that are monitored in association with one objective. As you can see here in this case, we have KPI 1, KPI number 2, and a strategic objective. So the idea is that I can have a KPI associated with a strategic objective, but then I also know that there is a direct connection and interdependency whether I reach this objective. Let's call it, for instance, objective A. But there are also other types of objectives. So maybe if I influence strategic objective A, I may influence also reaching strategic objective B. So how do I able to balance with the KPIs that I have? Well, the answer is the following. Whenever you think of this, of the KPIs that you have, so I choose to have these indicators to be my performance, my key performance indicators. Through the usage of them and through understanding of what they tell me, it is going to influence how I allocate my resources, right? So imagine, practical example, we have 15 KPIs. We have a scorecard, a my performance scorecard, and within those 15 KPIs that are monitoring my scorecard, I'm going to take decisions that are going to be based on the data of those 15 KPIs that they're going to provide me, right? So it means that my efforts are going to be directed towards areas, departments of the business, of my company that are actually underperforming, okay? So that I can able to, through the measurement, as I was saying before, take corrective actions. It means to take and ensure a performance improvement process. KPIs, so, are as well associated with targets. And what we know from psychological studies, we know that targets can drive people's behavior, employees' behavior. So it is good when, with goals, we're able to stimulate, we're able to motivate people to be better performers. However, the truth is that in practice, sometimes it happens that we have an opposite effect. It means that we might have some general negative behavior that are associated with targets. And we might have situations in which employees, people might be blinded by data. What do we mean by this? It means that we just look at numbers and data, but we are not able, maybe because we don't have the skills, maybe because we don't have the competencies or the knowledge to actually take data-driven decisions, data-driven actions. And maybe we're not able to ask the right questions in the right moment during KPI selection workshops, during performance review meetings. So the idea is that in terms of negative behavior and being blinded by data, we kind of create a sort of tunnel behavior. It means that we actually focus on that numbers, completely neglecting and forgetting the overall environment, completely neglecting the fact that the performance of my organization is not relying 100% on the performance that I do on my employees and my processes, but you have to take into consideration the external influences as well. Let's have a recent example that is kind of associated with the idea of tonal behavior. It is kind of associated with the idea of monitoring performance data, but actually manipulating it a little bit, because this is what tonal behavior is all about. There was an example, an episode actually a few years ago, where teachers in a public school were evaluated. They had performance evaluations yearly, and their performance of the teachers was based on the actual results of their students, based on the evaluations of the grades of their students. What happened, though, it was actually quite a bit of a scandal, that the teachers were actually manipulating the results of the students' grades in order just to look good at the evaluation that was about to happen at the end of the scholastic year. So what we want to make sure is that when we balance KPIs, when we have a complete approach, we not just have to focus on one particular aspect. So with the balancing, we are able to eliminate all the risks of tonal behavior. We won't have situations like this because we're able to have a focus not only on our employees, not only on our processes, but also to focus on all the influences that have somehow repercussion over my business. So just to make sure that we are on the right track. And in this manner, we can actually ensure a good performance measurement system that eventually will help us better perform, to have a better performance improvement system. And let's try to have a more practical example. So as I just mentioned, with the idea of being blinded by data, like it happened now with the examples of the teacher. So we look at the number and we do not know how to answer the right questions. So if we are not able to balance within an objective of having KPIs, we might have a little bit of an issue. But let's see this particular example. You have a strategic objective. It says ensure succession effective management. This involves a succession planning in human resources in HR. So I look at the effectiveness of my HR department through the perspective of whether or not I have 3 candidates for succession for each managerial position. This is the KPI that you have, number of successions candidates per managerial position, and the target is 3. This example was taken from a real case study from Royal Dutch Shell, used to assess the effectiveness of succession management procedure within an organization. And as you can see, the target was 3 candidates per managerial position. So it means that the results was actually achieved. There was a green target. The target was achieved. The problem, though, it occurred when the organization required for certain positions to be taken over. This was a real case scenario. So there was a moment in which the context required for a certain position to be taken over. So from the 3 candidates that they had available per position, which means that the KPI target was 3. In the performance scorecard, they had a green target. It was okay. However, none of the 3 could actually take the position. Why? Because I give you the example. One candidate wasn't able to relocate. One couldn't take over the position immediately. Another candidate was about to go to maternity leave in the following 6 months. So what is the point of this case? Although sometimes data might look good, might look promising, we need to be able to know how to ask the right questions. We need to know that sometimes we need to be able to focus not mainly on quantitative aspects as well as qualitative one. So it was good to have 3 candidates targeted. So it was a green target on the performance scorecard. But we could also have asked other questions like the availability of those 3 candidates in the following period, so that when I'm looking at the scorecard, we are green because we have the number of people, but we are red because none of them will be available to take over the position, which is a problem. So again, this is what balancing allows you to do. It helps you having to deal to insights and having an objective that you're measuring. So you have more insights to the objective and it helps you to balance. But how do we balance? We balance with 4 main principles that I will kindly show you and discuss right now. So let's start with the first one. It's the leading and lagging approach, or I should say the leading and lagging criteria, balancing criteria. So have you ever heard, first of all, of leading and lagging indicators? Is it new, or maybe some of you is already aware of the concepts? Well, leading and lagging are concepts that have been developed in association with business economic cycles. Reading literature review and articles, lagging indicators face a bit of a criticism because the fact that they provide indication of past performance. There's no indication about whether the future performance and how are we going to perform in the future. We do not know that. We just have indications of past performance. And given that we live in such an extreme dynamic environment, and today's business environment is changing such a huge phase, the usability of lagging indicators might be questioned, because the issue is that to what extent what happened yesterday can help me understand how my activities are doing now, and eventually how am I going to perform in the future. That's why we have leading indicators. Leading indicators enables us to have and address what can create future value, how we're going to perform better in the future. But let's have an example, shall we? Consider this KPI. It says service lead time. It indicates how much time it takes to provide a service. It could be a financial service, it could be a restaurant service, so any type of service that is associated with the customer. So the question I have from you is, how can we actually think whether this KPI is leading or lagging? Please use the chat box that you used a few minutes ago to answer the first question. And I'm interested to see what do you think service lead time is? Is it leading? Is it lagging? I give you 30 seconds, a minute to think about it. And please write what you think in the chat. I'm starting to see quite a bit of an interaction. I'm very glad. I don't want to influence other participants. So as soon as I would say that there will be no more answers, we will comment on that. I'm very glad that we have a lot of participants replying and to the question. Let me see if we have something more. Well, from the results that we have so far, we have a general common agreement that service lead time is a lagging KPI. So it says lagging, lagging, lagging. It is a lagging KPI, measures past performance. But we also have a leading KPI from one participant of the webinar. Well, let me tell you straight away, both of you are correct. Why? Because it depends on the context. But let me explain a little bit more in details. The idea is that even if I would have associated an objective to the KPI to provide you a context, let's example, I add you an example of objective associated with that KPI. We have provide on-time services. Whether the KPI is leading or lagging will depend on the context, on the organizational context we are analyzing. The same KPI can be leading in one context and lagging in another. But to provide more clarity and understanding to you, let's actually have a look at this DNA map. It's a leading lagging scheme. As you can see, we have service lead time at the bottom. And most of you said it's a lagging KPI. Some of you said it's a leading KPI. It is actually both, because I'm able to replicate the idea that service lead time ensures the fact that I will be satisfied. Imagine we are operating in a restaurant, okay? I will be satisfied with the service because I have a good meal and the service was quick and prompt. So I will be a satisfied customer. This means that service lead time is a leading KPI towards percentage of customer satisfaction. The satisfaction, though, is the result of a good service, right? So this means that customer satisfaction is a lagging KPI with respect to service lead time. I hope you see the connectivity between the two. But the curiosity is that I'm able to replicate such concepts throughout all of the layers of this scheme. But I would like to help you a little bit because I want to replicate this scheme using the perspective of the balanced scorecard. So let me add here the perspective of the balanced scorecard. We have financial, customer, internal processes, and people learning and growth. So the idea is the following. Let's start from the bottom, okay? If I have stuff that has the right level of competences, that it is engaged, it will definitely lead to a reasonable lead time, service lead time in my restaurant. So we can say that the people learning and growth KPIs are leading KPIs towards service lead time. But service lead time is the result of skills and engagement of my employees. It means that it lags on them. So it is a lagging KPI. And we can replicate such a scenario in all of the perspectives. Service lead time is a leading KPI towards customer satisfaction and lagging towards service lead time, as well as if I have satisfied customers, there is a good chance that we will have customers from referrals, so they will refer to us to other people. Or maybe that they come back to my restaurant, so returning customers. So these are all lagging KPIs on the customer satisfaction. But customer satisfaction is a leading KPI towards them. So here is on the customer perspective. The same can be said, given that I have returning customers, I have customers from referrals, there's a good chance that my market share might increase in that particular context. That will eventually have a good consequence on my profits, on my actually cash flow, on my operation activities. So the idea is that, to be sincere with you, the importance is that in this context, we are able to manage and assess whether some of the KPIs could be leading or lagging. But in this case, all of them could be both leading or lagging in accordance to the context. And using the full perspective of the balanced scorecard is extremely relevant because it provides you an indication that from my employees, I deliver good services. Good services will actually lead to a happy customer, a good customer retention rate that eventually would have good repercussions on my financials perspectives. Okay. But to be always on the practical side, let me show you this. We have leading and lagging, okay, KPIs. And I want to show you 4 different scenarios. Let's think about the scenarios where KPIs are, of course, related to one another because we have one objective and 2 KPIs, okay? So the idea is the fact that, for instance, ensure a safety environment. We have number of incidents of non-compliance and number of fatal accidents. The number of incidents of non-compliance reflects to the fact that maybe there are episodes in which, situations in which we are not in compliance with safety standards in the working environment. So this kind of gives an indication that if we might not have compliance in the working environment, there is the potential risk of fatal incidents. So as a leading KPI, we have the non-compliance. But fatal incidents is the result, potentially, of lack of compliance. In this particular context, of course, you have to think about all different other factors. But in this particular context, fatal incident is a lagging KPIs with respect to number of incidents of non-compliance. Of course, when it comes to leading and lagging, and you will also see in the other examples, you can apply it in so many different sectors and industries and contexts. I want to share this with you. It was a report done a few years back by UL, which is a company that is basically focusing on safety environments in the working place. And in their scorecards, in their performance reports, they use leading and lagging indicators for safety. So they have a program, they have an initiative, and they have associated KPIs that are leading and lagging in accordance to the context. However, what is very important is that sometimes you might have contexts in which you're not able to actually assess whether the KPI is leading or lagging, because maybe we don't have the right context, but maybe we lack the context as well. So the, let's say, recommendation I have is to make sure that you actually assess the relationship that those indicators have with respect to the strategic objective or with respect to the initiative or program that I am currently doing. Let's go with efficiency and effectiveness. This is another balancing criteria. So in this case, when I think of efficiency and effectiveness, I want to provide you a very small and clear example. If I achieve my objective, okay, and for instance, I have to deliver a product from point A to point B. So whether I achieve my objective or not, it indicates the level of effectiveness. So if I deliver the product, I will be effective. If I don't deliver the product, I might not be. So this is what effectiveness means, to the extent to which we actually achieve a desired output. Efficiency, though, is the fact that beyond the fact that you need to be able to deliver your product, what really matters is how you deliver it. How am I using my resources, my time? So this ensures and gives an indication of how efficient you are. That is why you have like KPI examples, cost per product, or time to process client order. These are all efficiency indicators that tells me how am I using my resources to actually deliver my product, to deliver my services, for instance, with my customers. Let's always stay though on the practical side. For instance, here you can have a look at this example, provide efficient market development. So how are we able to describe such a situation? Well, number of new customers actually tells me how many customers have I brought. So it actually indicates an effective measure. I have brought 11 new customers for my business today. So this shows how effective you are. However, to balance it, remember to have this 360% understanding and view, we have to balance it with also something that indicates my efficiency. So here we have new customers acquisition costs. What does it mean? It means, okay, how much money am I spending to actually have new customers? This indicates how efficient I am. So this balancing criteria supports the idea that maybe, let's imagine that, yes, I want to expand my market share. And I shouldn't be looking to expand it from a volume perspective, so as a number of customers, but maybe I should looking at it from increasing actually the business volume out of the already existing customers that I have. So maybe I just want to go on a different streams. I don't want to increase the number of customers, but maybe I want to increase the customer retention. So customers that will actually purchase more than once. And this will actually ensure the effectiveness of achieving a better market share. So you see how effective and how useful this balancing criteria is, helps you actually giving a broader perspective where we should actually focus our resources, whether in this case on the volume side or whether on the actual experience of the customer that will eventually come back to purchase a product or a service from us. This is from another real performance report from the town hall of Richard Hill in the United States. They had a performance report with KPIs, and they do make the difference between effective KPIs and efficiency KPIs. And of course, the idea lays in the fact that you have always be able to find a link to make sure that you understand the, let's say, connectivity, the relationship that these KPIs have in relation to each other, among them, but as well as in relation to the KPIs and objectives, strategic objectives that you want to achieve. Because sometimes, you know, it's important to be effective, to deliver, but at the end of the day, if you head of the department, you have to also think about my resources, how efficiently I'm using my resources, my time, my financials to achieve my objectives. Last but not least, quantity and quality. There is not such a big division because at the end of the day, we do accept the fact that when we have an objective, we can analyze the quantitative perspective easily. But how can we actually measure the quality? That's the problem. How can we actually measure a qualitative KPI? Because I'm saying this because one of the main characteristics of a KPI, you tell me, is measure. It's a measurable expression. It's a measurable expression of performance. If I'm not able to measure it, it's not a KPI anymore. So qualitative KPI are basically, in their essence, quantitative KPI. But they may reflect quality as a perception. Okay, so all KPIs, to give an idea, are clearly quantitative. Some of them might reflect quality as a perspective. For instance, how can I quantify customer satisfaction with services? How can I quantify error rates in my production lane, for instance? So these are all KPIs that reflect quality, but we need to be able to monitor and have an idea of how can we quantify them. And this is an example. Products error rate, for instance. We are able to assess the percentage of errors that I find in my production chain, for instance. And I need to be able to have a percentage to quantifiably understand where my error lies and how am I performing in this particular matter. But let's go on a more practical side, as usual, because this is, I think, more straightforward and visually clear to understand. Let's, for instance, think about nurture talent within the organization. Let's imagine we have 30 hours per full-time equivalent. So 30 hours maybe makes this metric to be like, okay, I'm performing, I'm successful. There are 30 hours of training per full-time equivalent. But we have to balance it with the quality of reaching your objective, because the objective, remember, is nurture talent within the organization. You can have as many hours of trainings that your employees will attend within a performance cycle, but you have to be able to balance it somehow. So the idea is that you have to balance it with the actual competencies, the improvement of the competencies of your employees. That's why we have percentage of employees with competencies at desired level. We quantifiably assess perceptions of quality. But what quality of what? Quality of the skills, of the competencies of my employees. So this is what balancing is all about. Being able to have this broader perspective, avoiding tunnel behavior, focusing on, okay, I have 30 hours of training, but what really matters to me is that whether or not the skills of my employees have improved as a result of such training. That is why quantity-quality criteria are very useful. The idea, though, is that this sort of KPIs, especially qualitative one, might be a little bit sometimes difficult to assess, because of course it will depend in accordance to the characteristic of the person, it depends on the context that we are applying. But on a general basis, this is how the perspectives is associated with the idea of having a general understanding of perceptions of quality that we need to quantify. And here as well, we have an example from a performance management report from the European Regional Development Fund. And they are able to actually, as a result of strategic objective, divide between quantitative and qualitative KPI. But again, what's very important is that sometimes qualitative KPIs might be based on surveys. So there is always that subjectivity, probably, that maybe might be associated with some biases. So to avoid any kind of bias, always being able to quantify it. For instance, in this case, you can see we have improving the environment for cross-border cooperation in order to strengthen the integration. And we have a KPI, it says level of cooperation quality in the border region. The problem with this KPI, though, is how can we quantify it? How are we able to actually have an understanding? How can we quantify? So that's very important to ensure that if you are in charge of your performance scorecard, if you are in charge of developing new KPIs, new strategic objectives, it is very important to always be able to measure it, have a tangible understanding of how we can quantify such KPI in relation to the organizational context. Finally, subjectivity versus objectivity. They're kind of related to the idea of quantity and quality. And as I was saying a few seconds ago, how can we be able to, for instance, quantify the perception? Like, what is the satisfaction or engagement index of my employees? You name it. How difficult can it be to actually capture such perception in a quantitative form? So we are trying to actually quantify, to measure something that is very difficult to capture in number. Hence, it will be affected by a sort of subjectivity bias, as I was saying before, because perception can vary in accordance to the characteristic of a person. Let's look at this example. We have the subjectivity indicators, net promoter score, customer satisfaction index, and employee engagement index. How can we balance such objective measures with something that is more objective? For instance, imagine I have 40% of net promoter score, okay? So how many promoters I have that actually will sponsor my products? So how can we actually bring it back to something that we can actually quantify? Number of customers from referrals. This is a more objective quantifiable measure. Customer satisfaction index. If I have, for instance, a high index of customer satisfaction, I'm actually inclined to think that customer complaints should be low, should be in the lower side of the quantity. Okay, so it's again a more objective approach. Think about employee engagement index. How can we actually quantify such an engagement? For instance, percentage of employees initiated contract terminations. So by monitoring, the idea is that KPIs sometimes can be a little bit tricky. Can be tricky because you're not able to quantify, you're not able to actually assess what I want to monitor. So always bring it back to the idea that we need to be able to actually quantify what I want to monitor. And this example of percentage of employee initiated contract termination is a very good example that we are able to assess, okay, we have 11% of my employees that have started such a termination procedure. This is a warning sign. This is a warning that we need to take corrective actions. So the idea is that by monitoring KPIs in the Balanced Scorecard, I do not have to basically think about, okay, I have these KPIs, they will be relevant, they will be useful for me to get some data, to get some performance data and take decisions. However, with this balancing criteria, it helps you actually have a better, longer longevity because KPIs do not last forever. They will need to be changed as the performance cycle changes, as the overall environment, our organizational environment, technology development, it changes at the speed of light. This means that the KPIs, maybe in 2 performance cycles from now, will not be relevant anymore. So be able, through this balancing technique, to change, to rethink about, to recalibrate the KPI that you have. To sum up today's webinar, the idea is that I want you to consider and reflect on the scorecard that you are actually managing at the moment in your organization, in your department, or whether or not you are planning to build your own performance scorecard. And I want you to assess and I want you to balance between the strategic themes, or let's say between the perspectives, and whether your strategy is able to embed all of the relevant aspects of your business. Please go and actually try to double check whether your actual objectives are able to embrace all of the perspectives, not only the financial one, but also your processes, your customers, your risk, the innovation that are associated with your organization, with your processes, so that you're able to apply these balancing principles within the same objective or within different strategic teams. This is a very important point. So please try to think about and assess whether or not you are having this 360% perspective and understanding of having a clear performance management scorecard that can actually helping you in take better decision. We can use this balancing technique as a summary, as a sort of quality technique, quality assurance techniques, because it helps you to avoid any kind of tunnel behavior. You have a 360 view perspective. You understand that the idea of KPIs, the idea of having to deal with my internal processes, with my employees, with my customers, you need to understand that you cannot monitor specific set of KPIs because you are going to neglect, you're going to lose a part of the business. You need to be able to have a general clarity, as well as I say here in the second point, understand the causality, because KPIs in these performance management tools are very, let's say, are very related to each other. So there is a strong causality relationship between the two. And through this causality, I'm actually able to monitor the achievement and the progress towards my strategic objectives. I wanted to thank you very much for your time. And Andre, if we have some time, I think we can answer a couple of questions. Thank you again.
Indeed, thank you very much for your presentation. If anyone has any queries of any kind, we'll wait a couple of minutes for you to address them. Well, given that there are no questions, then this brings us to the end of the webinar. Andrea, do you have any last words for our listeners?
Yes. Well, as I was saying a few minutes ago, I really want you to look at your scorecard, at the performance management tools that you're currently monitoring within your organization or department. And I really hope that whenever you will have the chance to go through it, you will think about the webinar and you will think that maybe some of the indicators that you're currently monitored can be better balanced. So this is the point I would like to leave you today, that you have to think about maybe some improvements that can help you having a better relevant performance management scorecard that will achieve and help you achieve your strategic objectives. Thank you again. Have a great day ahead.
Thank you once again very much for your presentation. The KPI Institute appreciates your interest in the webinar KPI Balancing, How to Create a Relevant Performance Scorecard. Follow our websites and our social media channels to find out more details about our next webinars when they get posted. Also, if you're interested in getting a certification granted by the KPI Institute on vital areas within the performance management discipline, you can explore our scheduled courses on marketplace.kpiinstitute.org. Thank you once again for your participation. We wish you the best of performance and have a nice day.